We appreciate you joining us. Coming off a big Nebraska win this past Saturday, and you, of course, do a tremendous video series for the Omaha World-Herald. Always great to check that out, man. And now, you had 10 takeaways from the win over Penn State. To me, looking at the schedule kind of from an outsider, Adam, we're from Kansas City, and we cover everything from the Big Ten, Big 12, and the SEC. But looking at Nebraska here, this is a real chance to get some momentum going forward without doing too deep of a dive, man. This win over Penn State, they were able to hold on with game against Illinois coming up. Still got Purdue and Minnesota on the schedule. This has a real chance to get some momentum for this team, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's weird because I don't even think Husker fans even realize that. It's just kind of like, it's been 357 days since we'd had a win. Of course, the season got pushed way back, so that contributed to that. But Husker fans are just like, man, we got to win. And Penn State's having a rough year, but they are a talented team nonetheless. So I think you make a great point, and I don't even think it's really registered with Husker fans because you got an Illinois team coming in that, I feel like we can definitely have some success and get a win against. You get a couple in a row because Scott Frost had talked about, man, he's like, I just feel like we're so close. You just got to get that win, that confidence, and that momentum. And if we could pull off 2 in a row, I mean, you never know what can happen. Minnesota doesn't look phenomenal. We got Iowa coming in for Black Friday, so that's always a highly intense game. So you never know what could happen if they could get this W against Illinois.
Well, where do things stand with Scott Frost, a favorite Nebraska son? He's there as head coach. And do you see at all, is Nebraska in danger of being in Jim Harbaugh and Michigan territory where Michigan, they've got their favorite son, Michigan's son, and Jim Harbaugh there as head coach, and they're having to question, like, can we really get rid of him? But the performance isn't there on the field, so we may have to get rid of our favorite Michigan son as head coach and Jim Harbaugh. Could that happen to Scott Frost in Nebraska here?
I'm completely bamboozled by the Michigan thing because you look at what Harbaugh did at Stanford. I mean, people forget just how horrifically horrible Stanford was when they were bad. They were winning like 1-2 games a year, and then he takes them to top 5, top 10. He goes to San Francisco where they're just as bad, like 2-14, 3-13, has all that success. As the 49ers goes to Michigan where he should actually be able to recruit with a brand name like that, and he's been struggling. So as far as Nebraska, is the potential there to be in the same boat? Yeah, the potential is there. If we struggle the rest of this year and we struggle next year, you never know what could happen. I don't think we're there yet. Harbaugh's been at Michigan longer, so he's had more of an opportunity, more chances. As far as Nebraska, that potential is there. Hopefully we don't get to that point. But for me, Frost hasn't had quite as much time, although you are in year 3, a very odd year. But nonetheless, it's year 3. So we're not there yet. Hopefully we never get there. But the potential definitely is to be there. I do think some Nebraska fans kind of have the mindset of, well, if Frost can't do it, then who can? And whether that's the correct mindset or not can be debated. But for me, I think because of that mindset, he's going to get a lengthy amount of time, to try to get this thing turned around.
Well, as we look at the rest of the Big Ten, of course, first kind of want to just get your thoughts on the Big Ten kind of being late to the party here, just a few weeks now into the season. It's an odd reversal of fortune. Now it's the SEC that's canceling all their games, and maybe the Big Ten will wind up catching up in the amount of games being played. But kind of your overall thoughts on that and how hard Nebraska fought to make the season happen. And maybe there is no Big Ten football without Nebraska and kind of some of the things that a lot of the players' parents put into place. And then just your thoughts on the conference in general when you got Ohio State that looks like a shoe-in for the playoff. But my goodness, out of the blue comes Indiana playing really well. And, of course, that's in the other division. And then just the collapse of Michigan and Michigan State. This has been kind of a crazy start to the season, but just kind of wanted your take on the Big Ten being late and now some other teams popping in here like Indiana.
Yeah, as far as the Big Ten being late to the table, and I'm a Nebraska guy, so maybe I don't see through it, with 100% clear lenses. Maybe it's a little biased with fogginess on my part, but I don't think there is Big Ten football without the way Nebraska and the parents and some of the players and students went after it. I don't think there's Pac-12 football because the Pac-12 was done when the Big Ten was done. So I do think there is that. As far as the Big Ten being late, I mean, when they canceled, I honestly thought I honestly think they thought everyone else would just fall in line. Everyone else would just cancel. They'd just be the first of many dominoes, and that did not happen. And now they've kind of boxed themselves into a corner where it's a condensed season with like many conferences, but there's no extra weeks. There's no opportunity to make up games. And it's kind of like, Wisconsin, if they miss one more game, they could go undefeated, not even play in the Big Ten title game, because you have to have played at least 6 games. So for me, I mean, at least we're playing football, but I feel like it was done really poorly, not giving ourselves the best opportunity, because even though the SEC is canceling games, they have opportunities to try to get more games in than us ultimately, potentially, depending on how many cancellations there are. As far as, Purdue and Indiana, I mean, as if 2020 wasn't off the wall enough. Who would have thought that Michigan State would be struggling, Minnesota, who everyone thought would be pretty good, and then here comes Indiana, and here comes Purdue. Northwestern is doing good, and they've had success in the past, but part of me likes it because I like unpredictability. Part of me doesn't like it because I want those brand names to be doing good. For me, I'm just looking to see how Indiana does versus Ohio State this weekend. Obviously, Ohio State's going to be the favorite, but what can Indiana do? Can they pull off the win? Can they make it close? Do they get blown out? What happens? To me, that's a very intriguing matchup right there.
Well, Adam, I just got to ask you kind of about, in the grand scheme of things, here we are in 2020, the game of football is so much different than it was in the 90s, even the early 2000s. Do you believe in the Nebraska style, the way they play, the running, the read option, the quarterback who they kind of want to throw anywhere between 12 to 15 passes a game and really lean on that run game in an athletic quarterback that can also be in that run game? Do you believe in that ultimately as far as a national championship in today's game?
I mean, if you look at most of the teams, and not everybody's doing it exactly like Nebraska, and not everybody's exactly like each other, but you look at Clemson. I mean, Trevor Lawrence actually can run quite well. You look at Justin Fields, Ohio State. You look at what Tua did at Alabama. A lot of the teams have gone spread, read option, a zone read. A lot of these offenses kind of mirror each other. That's what tends to happen. Everybody tends to kind of mirror and copy what's working. So I do think it can work. The only trepidation I've ever had, and I said this when the day Frost got hired, when I was happier, than a kid in the candy store that he got hired, I said my only trepidation is if you watched him at Oregon, and he only had, one real good season at UCF because he was only there for years, so it's hard to get a big gauge. But I look back at Oregon when he was there. A lot of times when they would play top teams, because Oregon's so fast, so much speed, when they would play in Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, or they'd play in Auburn in the national championship, I almost argued that Oregon was too fast because they would become too small, because they'd run into teams with speed and size, and they'd almost get pushed around a little bit. Mm-hmm. So obviously we haven't, we got to win a few more ball games in general before we enter that conversation on a national championship or a Rose Bowl type level. But to me, that's been my only trepidation, is can we still be physical? Because football, at the end of the day, speed, execution, it is still a physical game. So that's been my only trepidation. I do think it can work. I do think it's something we can have success with. But that's been the biggest thing I've always wanted to keep my eye on, if we're able to get to that point to begin with.
Well, Adam, I'll tell you, kind of last thing on Nebraska, and we got a couple NFL things for you, but you look at Scott Frost's record, it's 10-17. I'll tell you this, growing up in Kansas City, Missouri's in the Big 8, Nebraska's in the Big 8, it becomes the Big 12, and I watch the Huskers win 3 national titles in the 90s. And, as a Missouri fan and covering the Missouri Tigers now as we do, that was the program, that was the gold standard. When this thing kind of broke up and Nebraska goes to the Big 10 and 12, Missouri goes to the SEC, and you kind of look at the recruiting, and Nebraska had this, recruiting ground in Texas, and that kind of went away from Missouri and Nebraska. As you look at Nebraska's recruiting class, it's 17th overall by rivals, but it's kind of all over the place as they're trying to get that recruiting ground shored up. As a program, this is very overarching, but as a program, do you think Nebraska is where it needs to be in the Big Ten? And is this kind of, as a Kansas City, and it just seems like the brand name that Nebraska, it's not kind of what it once was here in Kansas City and maybe nationally.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, Scott Frost has actually recruited fairly well. And I'm not going to lie, we do miss that pipeline that we had down in Texas, and playing all those Texas teams absolutely helped. But Scott Frost has actually recruited well. The biggest issue that I've seen, and full disclosure, not many people want to touch it. They'll kind of point it out and then just move on past it. There's never really, it's, hey, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but this many kids have left as Scott Frost has got here, and it's a staggering number. And then it's just kind of left alone. Nobody really wants to delve into the why. You know, at first it was, it was Riley's players, or he needed to bring his guys in. A lot of the guys lately have been his guys. And so to me, the issue isn't recruiting. It's maybe recruiting the right guys. It's maybe, how do we keep them in? Because it's great to get them in the door, but how do you develop them if they're out the door in the next year or two? So to me, that's been the biggest hitch in the giddy up, because if you look on offense, there's a lot of young guys. And this is year 3. He should be able to have sophomores, juniors out there, and he has a few, but there's a lot of freshmen. You look at the defensive side of the ball, and they've been able to hold some more of those guys in-house that they've signed, and so they've got a little bit more experience. It's their 3rd year in the scheme. So, you give up 500 yards to Penn State, you still got a lot of improvement to make. But the defense made the 2 big stands at the end of the game, forced a couple of big turnovers, led to 10 points. Like, they're playing better than the offense. To me, the issue is, how do we keep those guys in-house? Are we recruiting the right guys to begin with? So the recruiting rankings, like what Frost is doing, keeping guys in is to me has been the one thing that's like, what's going on in that area?
Yeah, good point. And you were drafted by the St. Louis Rams, 1st-round pick, number 13 overall. You were there from 2007 to 2009. Your last year there, your head coach was Steve Spagnuolo. Us being here in Kansas City, our defensive coordinator, Spags. Just give us some insight on Spags and kind of his defensive philosophy.
He's a very detail-oriented guy. He's all about, causing havoc and problems in the backfield. It's interesting because I've done a million pass rush stunts in my life, but I've never done them on first down out of a base 4-3 defense. We're doing like tackle and end stunts, and I'm like, whoa, I've never done this, when it's not a obvious passing situation. So, but it's because he just wants to cause havoc. And he's a very detail-oriented guy as far as this alignment and assignment. But when it comes to up front, he ain't fancy about it. He's like, get in the backfield, knock people backwards, cause all sorts of problems and wreckage in the backfield. So that's kind of his philosophy.
Well, it's he's definitely turned this defense around. It's been incredible. And I know, Adam, of course, you finished up your career with the Washington football team. I know you're a guy that's outspoken, and you've been, you've been around and you've done shows. You've done a radio show on WWE, which I'd love to get into that with you sometime. I'm a huge fan going all the way back. And I know you've been on Fox News and Fox Business, and I know that you're, well-spoken on a lot of topics. So you played for the Washington Redskins. I guess we'll beat that out later. But what were just your thoughts, your thoughts on the name change? Because we're good friends with Joe Theismann, and Joe Theismann was not really wanting to get into it. He just said, hey, it is what it is. What was your thoughts on that? Because I know 2020, we've crossed a lot of boundaries. Politics has made its way into sports, man. I guess there's no way around it.
Yeah, my thought has always been this. It's never mattered to me. Okay, you probably are aware of this, but I'm a white guy. I'm a Caucasian guy.
Right.
To me, it's like my opinion doesn't really matter. Okay, it's up to the Native Americans. How do they feel? Do they find it offensive? Are they proud of it? I know some that have, some that are very proud. I know some that do find it offensive. To me, the problem is most of the voices that I see and hear, and obviously I don't see and hear everything, but what I see and hear, it's not them talking. I feel like it's other people speaking for them. And it's like, well, why don't we give them a louder voice, hear what they have to say, and go off of that? Because my opinion when it comes to that doesn't matter. Does it sound like it'd be racist? Yeah, it sounds like it'd be racist, but how do they perceive it? To me, that's all that's ever mattered to me, and to me, that's what we don't hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I tell you, Adam, it's just been a true pleasure. I want to have everybody go over to check out all of your stuff. It's the Carriker Chronicles, and it's up every week over at the Omaha World-Herald. You do a great job. It's definitely it's a must view for any Nebraska fan out there. So we'll see how the Huskers do this weekend against Illinois. I'm assuming it takes place by the time this airs. We could just have all sorts of things go wrong. We're covering the Missouri Tigers that haven't played in 3 weeks, Adam. So we're just trying to get this thing going and get some games finished here, man. That's what it's all about, I guess, this year, right?
Going back to your question from earlier, that's all I ever wanted from the Big Ten was to try to play football.
Yeah.
The SEC, obviously they're having issues. Everyone's having issues to some extent. But at least they're trying to play football. I think that was the thing that drove me the most nuts, was they just canceled. And it was like, well, let's at least try. If we can get 8 games, 1 game, 10 games, let's at least try. So I think I'm glad the SEC started earlier. They have more opportunities to get more games in, so I'm happy about that. I am impressed that you knew about the WWE show, because that thing was years ago. I'm still a big-time WWE fan. If you ever Google Fourth and Pain, you will see me much next to a much smaller individual. He lost 250 pounds, so that's a compliment.
I saw that, and
very healthy. Yeah.
You had some great guests on that show. You had Bill Goldberg on all the time, and there was always a rumor back then that the WWE was coming after you. So what we could have had you as a Universal Champion. What happened to that?
Yeah. If you ever have nothing to do with your life, Google Fourth and Pain, and maybe you'll be entertained for like 30 seconds. The banner, but I go back and I look, and man, the banner behind us was just terrible. We should have fixed that. But anyways, as far as that, it was 4 or 5 years ago when I retired. Every time I turn around, it's farther away and I'm older. But I hadn't retired yet. I hadn't retired yet, and they were getting ready to do their last season of Tough Enough, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, and it aired on USA Network in the summer. And they invited me to go do Tough Enough. And I thought about it. I'm like, man, I'm trying to get back into football, and I'm still working out. I don't think I could split time and still have a chance to get back into football, so I passed on it. They called back about a week later, and they said, we understand, and had me do a Skype interview with a whole bunch of them. And they asked me a bunch of questions, and the guy called me afterwards, because when I said I couldn't do Tough Enough, then they did the Skype thing. And I guess it was a compliment. He goes, you are as advertised. And I go, what does that mean? He goes, well, a lot of people can run their mouths, but when you get in front of people, can you still run your mouth and sound decent? He's like, you did a good job. I was like, oh, okay, thanks. He goes, you have a standing invitation to come work with us at the Performance Center here in Orlando, if you'd like. And it was so long ago, they probably don't even remember it. But, that's how it got left. I never took them up on it, and they've probably long forgotten me since. So
next WrestleMania, Adam Carriker versus Rob Gronkowski. Let's book
it. No fans, though. Sorry.
Well, there wouldn't be any fans anyways.
Exactly.
At least now we have an excuse.
Oh, Adam, you're the best, man. Hope everybody will check you out over at the Omaha World-Herald. It's great stuff. You do a great job. Thank you so much for joining us, man. We'll catch up again soon, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet.